Now that the threat of COVID-19 has somewhat dissipated, China is once again turning its attention to smashing democracy in Hong Kong. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. This is Breakpoint. Just about a year ago, voters in Hong Kong sent a loud and clear message to Beijing. They would not lose the freedoms they enjoyed. In fact, pro-democracy forces there won 389 out of 452 parliamentary seats in that election, more than 3 times their previous total. Even more, the results were seen as overwhelming support for the pro-democracy protests that had been filling the streets of Hong Kong for weeks. At the time, I wondered out loud just how Xi Jinping and his communist cadres would respond. I feared then and even predicted that Beijing would not sit idly by. Though distracted for a few months by the global pandemic they largely caused, it's now become clear their Eye of Sauron has turned its attention back to Hong Kong. On Thursday, China's National People's Congress announced it would deliberate a new law for, and I quote, establishing and improving the legal system and enforcement mechanisms for Hong Kong in order to, and again I quote, and of course they would claim this, safeguard national security. Now, what this means in plain English is that communist dictator Xi Jinping has had enough of trouble from Hong Kong and has decided to put an end to their rebellion. Unfortunately, there seems to be little the rest of the world can do about this. At least Beijing thinks so. And it's kind of hard to blame them. After all, it already dictates terms of surrender to global corporations such as Apple and the NBA, and it apparently can cow the European Union into changing its findings on COVID-19 so as not to criticize China. And apparently it's able to silence protests from Muslim nations about its cultural and physical genocide of millions of Chinese Uyghurs. No wonder they expect to get away with this too. Now, to review how we got to this point, when the British handed Hong Kong over to China in 1997, a unique one country, two systems regime was established that would make Hong Kong part of China, but also maintain its local government, economic and social systems, etc. At the time, China and the UK agreed that this arrangement would last for 50 years. Now, I'm not a mathematician, but we're not even halfway there yet. It's hard to imagine that anything short of an unprecedented global outcry will cause China to back off this time. The natives of Hong Kong have no doubt, by the way, about the seriousness of this threat. Hong Kong lawmaker Tanya Chan told NBC News, quote, I recall the time when I was young and I believed in one country, two systems, and we were going to showcase to the world that Hong Kong people can rule Hong Kong. But now, I'm not even 50 years old, and suddenly all is gone. Now, despite their show of force and so much that we hear about China, it's a lot weaker than it appears. Economic growth there is at its slowest pace in nearly 3 decades of modern record keeping. Throw in a sinking labor force and the added economic impact of COVID-19, and China's Communist Party's got a big problem on its hands. Their only source of legitimacy to this point has been economic growth. For the past 40 years, the Chinese people have been asked over and over and over to trade certain freedoms away for increasing prosperity. The fragile balance is sure to collapse if that prosperity goes away. That's why it's no coincidence that Xi Jinping has doubled down on his own cult of personality and cracked down on religious freedom just as China's economy began to slow down. The renewed call to Chinese nationalism from Beijing effectively distracted the population from the growing economic worries there and also offered an effective pretext for cracking down on Hong Kong protesters, many of whom, by the way, see their protesting as an outworking of their Christian faith and something for which they're willing to die. Because so much of the Christian activity in China flows through Hong Kong, an assault on Hong Kong is rightly seen as a part of the larger war on Chinese Christianity. Look, we must pray for Hong Kong, including the hundreds of thousands of Christians there. We also must pray against the power of Beijing and specifically of Xi Jinping. And we must pray that world leaders would show the backbone that's been sorely lacking whenever it comes to China relations over the past decade. Look, there cannot be business as usual with such a brutal regime. For Breakpoint, I'm John Stonestreet.